Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful. It's great to be here in Brighton today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tom Bridge. I'm the Principal Product Manager for Apple Technologies at JumpCloud. I've been that for all of 11 months and 3 days at this point. And prior to that, I ran an MSP in the DC area and talked a lot about the subject that Dan Jones just gave a really great talk on, Wi-Fi, and something I've presented here before. Today, I'm here to talk about something a little bit different. And the session title is a little misleading. I apologize. As a vendor, we're expected to give vendor-related talks. I don't like those. I like talking about things that actually really matter to people, and that's experience. And so particularly, I'm here to talk today about that experience matters. And specifically, we're going to talk today about how patching and zero touch change organizations. And patch management writ large is incredibly important to your users' experience with their devices, specifically around trusting them, and specifically around trusting you. So, I want to talk first about my son for a minute. This is Charlie. He's 8. He's an outgoing kid, loves to play, loves to tinker on devices. So he's me, but smaller. Getting a chance to firm up some of the first principles with your kids is some of the scariest parts of being a parent, right? What if they glom onto the wrong thing? But out of all of that, you can't worry about it too much because it's part of the joy of shaping young minds. And a few years ago, he joined the Boy Scouts of America in the US. And Scouting BSA, as it is now known, is a great experience for little kids. And there's a whole curriculum that they do around preserving the outdoors and engaging in conservation. It's a great way to get out and go for a camping trip with your kids or go for a hike or talk about what nature is really important for, and to do a lot of those kind of things together in your community. As part of our weekly meetings, we recite the outdoor code after we do all of the Scout law and the Scout oath and all of those things. As part of that meeting structure, we have enshrined the outdoor code into that piece. And the outdoor code says, and of course, because it's Scouting BSA, and of course, because of those organizations are mostly nationalistic, I apologize. The only way I can remember it in my head is to start it with, as an American, I will do my best to be clean in my outdoor manners, be careful with fire, be considerate in the outdoors, and be conservation-minded. And it's a helpful reminder to our youngsters that being outdoors means taking responsibility for that space, to be good stewards of the world in which we live, and to give the world around you due care and attention. It's awesome to watch this take hold with kids and watch it really kind of be part of who they are. And I got to thinking recently while we were out in the woods in Anne Arundel County in Maryland, and we were thinking about it, and I was kind of like, you know what? What I really need is this kind of thing, but for IT. I need that short statement that I can keep in my head and figure out how do we do those kind of things. If you haven't seen my session yet from the fall's conversation at Mac Sysadmin on having an IT code of ethics, I'll put that in the resources that'll be available for download later. But the important things to think about in terms of doing IT right in 2022 in this post-pandemic world, in an ongoing, adventure that we continue to find ourselves in. This is the first conference I've been to in really long time. I'm not used to seeing this many people, and I'll admit that I was freaking out a little bit this morning as everybody started coming into the room, and I'm like, I'm going to be in a room with a lot of people today. But overall, I keep coming back to the conversations that we have in Scouts and that I have with Charlie about being a responsible steward of the world in which we live. And we talk a lot about what it means to be considerate of the outdoors and to be careful with fire. And he's a Bear Scout this year, which is the part of the middle of the program, right before you get to the Boy Scouts, and they tell the parents to take their hands off the till, which I think is a smart choice. But as part of their Bear Scout leadership this year, they get to learn how to use knives. And I don't know who thought giving a bunch of 8-year-olds knives was a brilliant idea, but here we are. And as a parent, we got into the room with those kids and I was like, we're going to give an 8-year-old a knife and a bar of soap and a whole lot of hope. and hope that we don't have to go to, I believe they call it A&E over here, but it's the ER in the United States. And of course, going to the ER means you better have your wallet handy, my friends, because we don't believe in healthcare the same way that you guys do. We take that as a point of pride now, which I think is a little bit stranger, but it's definitely a little bit of an experience. But in the end, when we got done with that segment, no one had gone to the A&E, and the first aid kit only got a little bit of use, so we had figured out how to do this right. So that got me thinking about an IT code. So as an IT professional, I will do my best to preserve company data from carelessness and compromise, protect my people from attack and their occasional inattention. I will defend the integrity of my organization against bad policies, poor security, and short-sightedness. And lastly, but most importantly, I will empower them with knowledge. And so this is the approach that I think we have to take in 2022 to get the job done, especially now that we are not on a first-name basis with all of our folks because we don't see them in the flesh every day. We work from wherever we are. At JumpCloud, when we began the pandemic, we had 2 offices in Boulder and Denver, and all our people were there. That changed in March of 2020. We are now in 6 countries and in 41 states. We have more than doubled in size just in the last year, and we are everywhere. It was great. I walked into the London room where we were having our roadshow on Monday, and I doubled the number of people I've met from JumpCloud in person. It was delightful to be in that space with my coworkers and to go and see them in the person. So we're in this, it's not the pandemic is over, it's becoming endemic. The world that we're in that is focused on remote support, that is focused on hybrid working, and doing so in a secure way, is the future. We have to embrace that and extend into that full time. So there's 2 things I want to focus on today that are experiences that you, the admin, control entirely and that mean incredible amounts of difference to your organization's choices. And those are patch management for macOS and zero-touch enrollment. Because these are the 2 experiences you're going to have most often with your remote experience or with your remote employees. So staying on the most current version of the operating system is frequently called out as one of the best ways to avoid being breached by an attacker. For macOS, this can mean a couple of different patch management types. And so if we think about it, back in the United States, not here in the UK, we have an organization called CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. They have a very, I kind of dig the logo. It's not too crazy federal and creepy. But CISA provides 4 recommendations for us. They say, enable automatic software updates whenever possible. This will ensure software updates are installed as quickly as possible. They say, do not use unsupported end-of-life software. They say, always visit vendor sites directly rather than clicking on advertisements and links. Who here has gotten a Flash installer? Yes, still in the year of our Beyonce 2022. And then last but not least, avoid software updates while using untrusted networks. The Hilton network untrusted? What do we feel about that? What's the thought amongst the crowd? So if we start thinking about each of these for any longer than a minute, you're going to recognize that there's caveats and there are concerns galore in each one of those 4 things that we've just talked about. And I can already hear them forming in your head. So let's take them on one by one. Automatic updates are great when they work perfectly. Who here upgraded to Chrome 99.blah-blah-blah.ends in 83 recently for your users? Who here had screen sharing break as soon as you did that? Why did that happen? They changed the code signing certificate that was used to sign Chrome. And so all of our machines that had gone through the process of saying, yes, privacy preferences policy, control policy for screen recording, I will allow Chrome, which ends in the certificate that ends in a really long serial number, I will allow that one to touch my screen and share the screen that's out there. Well, when they changed the code signing certificate app, macOS kind of popped in and said, No, I'm not going to share that window with your Chrome application because that's no longer the person that I allowed to do that. Changing those processes was not straightforward. In many cases, in some cases, under some particular cases, you had to, at the end, remove Chrome entirely and reinstall it to get the privacy preferences policy control policy to kick in again. And of course, immediately thereafter, we got the note, Sunday, so less than 48 hours ago, we got the note that Chrome that ends in .83 was insecure, and now you need .84. Oh, and by the way, it's such a zero-day attack, it's being exploited in the field. Now you, as the Mac admin, need to jump into action and patch that browser for the entirety of your organization, breaking screen recording. If you are using automatic patching and automatic software updates with your hands off the keyboard, you might have a problem, and your help desk is going to hate you briefly. And then they're going to hate you a little bit more, and that's OK. But that's the danger of automatic updates. So if we think about this from the operating system perspective, Apple's own documentation, and here I refer to this past summer session on updating macOS, indicates that admins often need time to evaluate the state of a given update for the operating system. You'll note here, by the way, that admin testing begins during the beta cycle. I'm going to ask a question, and your answer is going to be, uh-huh. I'm telling you what the right answer is before I ask the question, which is to say, who here starts testing the operating system during the beta cycle? That should be every hand up. Robin's shaking his head. We'll hear more about that later, Robin, at the pub, probably. But catching changes that are in release notes are one thing. Having a working device on the bleeding edge, however, will help you understand the severity of the changes as well as allow you to provide necessary feedback into the Apple ecosystem. The second one takes us to a peculiar situation for Apple devices. Do not use unsupported end-of-life software. Oh boy. This is where things get philosophical. Apple famously does not declare a time frame on the end of life of its major releases, do they? They don't do us that favor. For example, if I were to ask you, the Mac admin, to say, is macOS Mojave end of life? The answer is demonstrably yes. It has not received an update in 227 days, I believe is the current count. Is it end of life? If you ask Apple, they will not reply. So this table, provided by the inimitable Howard Oakley of Eclectic Light, probably one of the most prolific writers on the state of Apple platforms, gives us this table regarding macOS and macOS X support periods. And so you can see there, full maintenance for individual operating systems. This is from a post from about 6 months ago. We'll show you somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 days for each major operating system is kind of what's there. Now, security updates happen after that. We are still getting patches for Big Sur, and in some cases, Catalina. Are those end of life? Again, we don't know. Apple does not tell us. The first law of patch management says the second most secure computer is one that's fully patched. The first most secure is, of course, one that's off and in your desk. Can't hurt you if it's off. So the only thing we're left to know from Apple is that the most secure version of the operating system is the latest one. In this case, macOS 12.3. There is an option there to say the second most secure is 11.6.5, or the N-2 version of Catalina with its build number, which I cannot remember off the top of my head, sorry everybody. But it was really convenient when they moved to Big Sur and adopted iOS's a more sensible patch level system, which is essentially releases always go up instead of staying the same with just a build number that changes. So Howard has a great quote here, and he says, what is strangest of all, or would be for any other company, is that Apple never tells its customers when a minor update is the last before entering the security update phase, nor when a major OS version of macOS is receiving its last security update. It's almost as if it's ashamed to admit such important information, including its software support policy. So that takes us to our last two items on this list. I'm going to take them together because when it comes to patching macOS and when it comes to patching the operating system writ large, what we get to think about is something a little bit different, right? So when it comes to patching macOS, the only place to get updates is directly through Apple. Fortunately, that's a good thing. I'm perfectly fine with that. With the system volume being signed and sealed, starting in Big Sur, the only way to update the OS is via software update, via system preferences software update, or via the command line, or via MDM command executed against the device. This second one is also fairly anodyne when it comes to macOS. Due to code signing and integrity checking at multiple points throughout the process, Apple updates, while requiring network access, don't require highly secured network access. Everything's handled over TLS. Everything is properly signed. All of the important bits are done locally on the device, over encrypted channels back to Apple to confirm. So this takes us to an important question. How does this change when we come across the pond? Well, I'm happy to tell you that Cyber Essentials is a hell of a lot better than anything we in the States have to offer. And that there are clear guidelines that software must be licensed and supported. Again, can we determine if Mojave is supported? I would largely argue it is not. I would largely argue that since only the most recent version of the operating system is getting patched for all of the CVEs that are published on Apple's site, only macOS Monterey should be considered to be licensed and supported in this case. If you had a very strict auditor, I think they could make that argument effectively. Who here has dealt with a really strict auditor? They're super fun, right? It's like going to a tax accountant, only with less personality. But if you think about what the regulations say here, software must be patched within 14 days of an identified critical or high vulnerability. Yowza. 14 days isn't a lot of time, is it? Which is phenomenal. So that takes us to another conversation. Why is this patch management solution important? Well, if you need to be compliant with Cyber Essentials, that's a fairly good reason, don't you think? However, it's not the only one. This is my I'm going to scare you now slide. I don't need to. You know this already. This is the golden age of cybercrime, which sounds like a really great article in Time magazine that's full of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Not ideal. It makes the point, however. Things are pretty rough out there. And it's your job as your admin to preserve, protect, and defend your enterprise. The number of vulnerabilities discovered in key software products is on the rise, as you can see on the left there. And particularly since 2017, you can see that things are on the major uptake. This is through the end of last year. This year's graph is no better. Things are not trending the other direction at this time. Worse, if we look at the identified causes of breaches, those three that are circled in red there, missing operating system patch, missing app patch, operating system misconfiguration, are all your problem. Or your fault, or your opportunity, depending on how you want to spin it. But this is the place where sysadmins, and Mac admins in specific, get to preserve, protect, and defend their enterprise. Right? Because if we go back to what that IT code says, those are the words: preserve, protect, and defend. 53% of small businesses say that either their business doesn't have a plan in place to deal with a cyber attack, or they're not sure if they do. I'm a little discomfited by the idea of not even being sure if you have a plan. You either have a plan or you do not. If you're not sure you have a plan, you do not. So how does Apple intend for patch management to work? Apple intends you to do an MDM-driven solution. They essentially say that only supervised Macs, either enrolled through user-approved MDM enrollment or through automated device enrollment, which are those handy acronyms that I've left behind, can receive a delay policy. So that you can say, I will delay this minor update, or this major update, or these non-OS updates. Those are the three main categories. Those are the three switches we have. We have wait. MDM gives us wait. And that is all they give us, right? And of course, Apple intends for us that users will always comply with an update request. This third bullet point is caused from an experience that I had in my career. The manager of the box office at Merriweather Post Pavilion was probably the busiest single human being that I have ever met. Imagine managing all the requests for rock concert tickets from literally everyone in the band, literally everyone they know, and their agent and their record label and all of those things. Her phone never stopped ringing. She just turned it off at the end of the day. But one day I happened into her office while I was still at Technolutionary, and this is at the point where Big Sur is already out. Now, we weren't recommending it for upgrades, so we weren't pushing the situation, but she was still running 10.12.4, not the terminal release of Sierra, 10.12.4. Every day at 10 a.m., she would hit the not now button. Let me live my life. I have more important things to do. The updates were not convenient. For 1,240 days, she clicked not now. Every one of us knows someone like this in our environment, where the job they are hired to do is not wait 45 minutes for a macOS update to complete. The job is not to go take a coffee break. The job is not to do those things. But here we are. Every single one of your employees is in the IT security business, whether they want to be or not. Now, you get to help them out. That's a wonderful thing. But as part of all of this, that's what you have to watch for. And of course, Apple intends that macOS Monterey's new deferral mechanism is enough for your organization. That if you use a properly formatted MDM command that says, please, pretty please, update tonight while you're asleep. And it's going to work all the time. Every time it's going to work. And we'll let you defer 5 times. And we'll let you do all these things. This is what Apple contends for you to believe. So let's talk about what's real. We have to talk about how this actually works. From my perspective, an MDM-driven solution is the only way to make sure that this works for your organization. Has to be driven from your MDM. Should not only be your MDM, should start there. Your MDM solution is the only way to get a delay in the software, so that if you just want even 24 hours before from a patch being released to it starting to be prompted for your users, that's the only way to get that. And if you want 3 days just for IT to check to make sure CrowdStrike or Sophos or your antivirus solution of choice still works, great, take that time. Don't wait much, but take some time. Now, the next part is really important. User-driven acceptance. Without regular notification, or without, I was going to say user-driven exception needs to come with, shall we say, politely encouragement and not nagging. Maybe intentionality, but not hectoring. But at some point at the end of the process, you need to get to a point where users will just give in and accept the delay. And your organizational culture needs to support this 45-minute update period. That's probably, of all the things that we talk about today, the hardest for you to do as an admin, is to influence your operational culture. To say that, yes, software updates are inconvenient. Yes, they take time. Yes, they are painful. But they are necessary and critical to your environment, and your culture should support them. So, nudging your users to victory. Who here's seen this dialogue? Not as many hands as I expected, but plenty good. Eric Gomez deserves the Galactic Institute's prize for extreme cleverness for his development of Nudge, as seen here. If you've yet to use Nudge for macOS to explore your patching options, please go do so at that URL at the bottom, github.com/macadmin/nudge. This is the right model to use for prompting your users to do this job. So, how are we doing this? how does JumpCloud go through this process? And I promise this vendor portion of the slides will be very quick and painless and not hurt anyone at all. So we are using calendar-based and not time-based due dates for software versions. Nudge as a whole expects a hard point in time after it must require an update. And then it must go to a specific version of the operating system. We think that what you really want is a calendar-based kind of situation where we'll say update within 7 days of finding out there's an update. Not of the update's release, of when your system figures out that there's an update. This allows for easy policies for loaner devices, which means you can pull an IT loaner out of the closet. It might only be running 12.1, but the user's not going to get nudged in their first day, in all likelihood, because it hasn't determined that there's an update. It's been your most secure computer because it's been off. This allows for a little bit of flexibility for devices that are in lower use percentages. I know a number of people who work at our company who have multiple machines. I embarrassingly brought my entire fleet, which is 3. And we're only just now starting to nudge because that machine has been off and in my backpack for the last 5 days. This also takes the admin's hands off the policy changes at version change time. Again, the most secure version of the operating system is the one that has been patched most recently. Your goal is not to get to within 1 patch of fully patched. Your goal is to get patched so that you are secure. So essentially, we don't want you to have to rewrite Nudge's policy every time a new version of the operating system comes out. We want that to happen from the smarts of the agent on the device and get you to where patch needs to be. So the other thing that we are doing as part of our process is building sane defaults for easy-to-use policies. If you look at JumpCloud's policies, we carry 4 by default. You are welcome to use 1 of them, none of them, 4 of them, or create additional ones on top of your own. We saw that the best solution that we could have would be a Vanguard group for IT, and we called it the Vanguard group because it's cool. I'll be honest. We went for the markety word there. Early adopters are people within your organization who understand the software that they are using on a given daily basis. I can tell you how to deploy RStudio. I can tell you how to deploy Adobe Creative Cloud. I can tell you how to deploy, as a power user, Microsoft Word. Am I a power user of any of those tools? Absolutely not. But I wasn't hired to be. I was hired to be an IT professional. I was hired to be the person who was out there deploying the software. So what I want are early adopters who understand and who will report back, yeah, I launched RStudio and I typed in the statistics algorithm I was intending to use, and what I got was not right. I think the operating system is having a problem with this version of RStudio. Those are the people who are going to tell you you have a problem, and you can push those policy dates around. Then last but not least, general adoption and late adopter pools of users. There are good reasons to have late adoption groups, and those are things that you can have as part of your organization to really protect the roles of systems that are not on the edge of your business, that are not crucial to these things, but represent high utilization. In the before times, in the olden days, I would have said that our conference room computers, which were really just in use as meeting rooms and things along those lines, maybe those were late adopter environments, because taking a conference room offline for an hour a day when you've got 70 people lined up to use it, maybe not the best use of your time. So you can go to a late adoption model that gets things a little bit later than everybody else. Last but not least, we're building good reports for compliance and participation. And so that you have a good understanding of where you are there. That updates register in our Directory Insights platform so that you have full API access to understand who's up to date and who's not, and more importantly, when they got up to date. How many people have ever been asked for a report, hey, we saw there was a new vulnerability out last Thursday at 7 p.m. How many people were patched within 24 hours? How long were we vulnerable to that particular situation? So you need to be able to tell that based on time-based APIs, like Directory Insights that JumpCloud has. And then also downloadable reports for your full status. We'll give you all of that out of the devices report, but it's not meant for patch management reporting yet. And your CISO may look at this and say, that's pretty, very nice, not useful to me. Your CISOs have a standard format for these kind of things that we'll be adopting. And then last but not least, much better filtering in the admin portal for devices overview. So, is it working? Yeah, it's working. Stuart's one of our customers here in London, and we had deployed the macOS policies to him first before the Windows policies were ready. And they had 11 versions of macOS. They were down to 2 by less than a week later. They had gone from 11 separate versions of Big Sur, Monterey, and Catalina down to the most recent versions of of Catalina and Monterey. They chose to use nudges functionality at that point to get them to the most recent version of the operating system because all of their users were admins. So what's it look like in the platform? Here you can see our release trains. I was wrong. It's 251 days since the latest version of Mojave. It is definitely end of life. It is no longer supported. Cleanse it from your enterprise with fire if necessary. And then we think about the rest of the operating system platforms. We got security patches approximately 15 days now. So at this point, if you're a cyber essentials organization, you should be patched, right? In theory? In practice? So these are what the policies look like in your environment, and we'll create all 4 of them when you turn the feature on. You don't have to do the work. We'll get you there. We will say at that point, for your Vanguard, 0 days delay, right to the new version of the operating system. You have 3 days to get through the grace period and execute the update. For your early adopters, we'll let you wait a week, and then we'll give you a week to update. For your general adoption group, we'll let you keep that at 15 days. For your late adopters, up to 30. And each of those carry a 2-week window to complete the update. During that process time, the user will be bugged approximately twice a workday up until they get to 3 days from the end, when it turns to every 100 minutes, so about 6 times during the day. On the last day, when they have been bothered twice a day for 2 weeks, 6 times a day for 2 days, well, friends, it is time to update, and now we must make you comply. Every 10 minutes, you see the dialog until you have done the necessary task. So it's very aggressive at the end. And then once the window completes, well, there's no deferring that window. It's at the palette level, my friends. It does not go away, cannot be moved. So it's there. You're just going to update. That's what's going to happen now. Please. We have asked you nicely. We've asked you nicely many, many times. We are done saying please. So again, good policies take you from the Vanguard group all the way through your early adoption and general adoption and late adoption cycles. So when your Vanguard is done, you can basically say, now I can test this with, all of my tools work. Let's see if everybody else's do. So the early adopter gives you the all clear. They say, RStudio's doing great. Creative Cloud's never run faster. And the whole 9 yards is just working, right? You can go from there to general access. Let general adoption groups take through the process. And then when they complete, start the late adopters. This is going to take you through where you need to go. Inside those policies are the individual pieces of all of this. You want to automatically prompt your users to install available updates. And you get to choose the grace period. It's set in days. We like to think in days, not hours, for patch management. We think that's appropriate. And so by default, the Vanguard policy is no delay, 3 days grace. Delay will take it out of the user's hands. They can't update. The system will not prompt them. They will be left alone until such time as you open the window. The grace period is the accelerator. If Apple's given us the brakes, we've had to invent the accelerator so that we can go into this process and get what we need to done. Sorry, I jumped too early. Right now, that major OS updates policy is useless to you. It will be useful again come the fall when macOS 13, lucky 13, are they going to jump? I mean, serious question. Triskaidekaphobia is real. Are they going to find something new? Anyhow, that policy is useless to you today because the version, it has been 90 days, and that is the length of time that you can defer a major update. It's been 90 days since the release of Monterey. This policy will become useful again to you in the fall. And then last but not least, you can defer those non-OS updates like Safari updates and other device updates and Xcode updates and things like that, as well as part of this policy. These are all MDM-driven policies. It requires management by JumpCloud in your MDM. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about now that we've talked a lot about patch management, is the more exciting, more enabling part of this feature that you get full control over. And that is zero-touch enrollment. Zero-touch enrollment changes the deal for a lot of your organizations in terms of how you go through the process of enrolling new machines, especially in a pandemic where touching stuff and being in the same room as another person was, shall we say, societally prohibited. Not a great experience. As an admin, we used to do a lot of fun things. But we get to think about this statistic for a minute. The Society for Human Resources Management says that great onboarding increases retention by 82%. Now, as admins, we've heard from the first talk of the day that as admins, we like to be a little bit lazy, having to go through the provisioning process over and over and over again because staff turnover is a Ferris wheel. Well, the less I have to do onboarding, the more I can make it great. I keep my people. I keep my coworkers. I have preserved, protected, and defended that experience for my people. So, before we dive into zero touch, we have to go through a little bit of what came before. In the beginning, there was hand setting things up. And there was golden imaging through Casper on the Windows side, ASR on macOS, and we could take a machine back to the operating system of its youth. Those were not great days. Don't think of them as halcyon. What came next was fascinating because then we got just-in-time provisioning. Deploy Studio. Oh, Deploy Studio was so satisfying as an admin because you could say, wipe this machine, install this operating system, install these 20 packages, install a printer, do a happy dance, play a song, and then the machine's ready to go. And all you had to do was netboot that machine and walk away. That was great. Those were halcyon days. Not terribly awesome, though, when it came time to doing things like MDM enrollment and full control of devices. So Apple announces Device Enrollment Program, the original automated device enrollment, which gives us the ability to essentially process things directly through the supply chain and enroll them in your MDM of choosing at that point. This starts in 2011. And while it was US only to start, it rapidly expanded to the rest of the world, and we're now at the point where many of the countries out there in the world can use a DEP-capable reseller to go through this process. However, authentication was not required at MDM enrollment time, still required network access, maybe not the most functionally happy experience for admins. Automated device enrollment arrives. It starts showing up over the last 5 years, and we get the ability to do SAML authentications directly from Setup Assistant to identify the user, use that information in tools like Workspace ONE, Jamf, JumpCloud, all of those places to identify not just the device, but who's on it. And how do we execute against those things? How do we use that information to determine what the customization experience is? And then last but not least, we get the full zero-touch enrollment, where admin doesn't have to think about the device as long as everything goes perfectly. I should have said the quiet part a little quieter, right? That's the unhappy path. However, Monterey helps us out. Who here loves erase all contents and settings? Single best feature to come to macOS from the macadmin's perspective in years. Does what used to take an hour in 5 minutes. I feel like Kirk explaining Genesis and Wrath of Khan. So let's think now, after the history, what's the goal of a good enrollment? What's the goal in that experience? And we have to think about this from two perspectives. Perspective one is, what does my new coworker experience when they onboard? Well, they want to be prepared for a successful role at their new company. They want to make sure they have the right tools and that your coworker has a good experience getting started with your company. They're excited on their first day of a new job. I can't tell you, the first day at JumpCloud, I was like positively vibrating because it was the newness of the whole thing. I hadn't had a new job since I started Technolutionary in 2006. It was way too long between new jobs. But those are not the only goals you have because IT has wants and needs too, and I don't want you to discount those. In this case, the goal of IT for a good enrollment is that IT has had to do very little except order the device for delivery to the employee. That they can customize the experience with after-action commands and controls. It's not enough to just hand them a machine and get it enrolled in an MDM. You need to do the next steps for your people. And then IT gets the device into the known good state for your organization's policy. Disk encrypted, firewall on, security software with system extensions enabled. All of those things need to be deployed. Key applications delivered. So choosing your path for enrollment is a huge part of that. Do you want to make it authenticated? If it's going to be authenticated, are they going to know what their credentials are? How do you make sure? How do you make sure that they've set themselves up properly for that experience? How do you go through the process of, do you want the user to be choosing all of those choices during Setup Assistant? Depending on the route you take, there's something like 16 screens in Setup Assistant. That's a lot of configuration on your first day that you may not actually care about as the end user of this device. Are we going to download apps during the enrollment phase? Which ones? How do we choose? Am I going to make them wait for the download of all of the Office applications before I release them to their desktop? Please, unless that is absolutely necessary, do not do that. Give them the tools they need to start, not the tools you think they need to start. And then last but not least, these are all of the choices you as the admin get to make. You should not make them in a vacuum. You should make them with the advice and consent of the people you work with every day. So, what are the levers of automated device enrollment at this point? These are automated enrollment choices that you get to make. Authenticated or not? Are you going to wait for apps to deploy or not? Are you going to do file vault encryption immediately, or are you going to do it later? The answer to this one used to be, well, there used to be a lot of different philosophies there. Not any longer. The answer is immediate. I really shouldn't have put a question mark on there, and I shouldn't have included delayed. The answer is, it is 2022. The answer is encrypted always. Do it right away. And then last but not least, do you want to control Setup Assistant's experiences? Do you really want to give them the chance to make a choice for some things that they don't need to make a choice for? Give them the opportunity to make the location services choice. You have to. It's the only way location services gets turned on right there. But then the rest, do they need to wait? Or do you put them in control? So here's my thought on the sliders. And then I think I'm starting to get the high sign for questions, which is to say, you should default to your users making choices where they are impactful, not just because. You should default to enablement and not restriction. That's a little at odds with what we just talked about, isn't it, though? However, coworkers who have good experience, that you can say that you trust them to do the right thing, even when maybe that trust is a little bit misplaced, gives them the feeling of control in their environment and gives them satisfaction in their job, whether they realize that or not. You also get to think about some things in such a way that you shouldn't ever have just one onboarding. You should be revisiting this constantly. So have a design document for this experience where you're not just documenting the choices that you're making, but why you're making them. And so there are plenty of reasons for you to sit down and write down the choices that you've selected. But talking about the why gives everyone else who follows you or works with you in your department understanding of why you made the choices that you made and when you make them. The other thing that's important is one of those great product design tips that I love, which is strong opinions loosely held. Don't fall too in love with your onboarding workflow that you won't be willing to change it. And so if you've got a good argument for why things are the way they are, great, awesome, wonderful, love it. But if someone comes to you with an idea, consider it. Work it in. Give it a test drive before just kicking it aside. And then I think the last one is most important. Default to shorter is better. These people were hired to do a job. They were hired to work inside your organization. Chances are their onboarding process is not just IT. There's HR policies. You got to fill out all sorts of paperwork to work in the States. I-9, you got to find somebody who's going to verify your documents now, which is a whole big adventure. There's all sorts of stuff that you need to do to get accustomed to the environment they're in. A shorter period will get them into that flow faster and take their hands off the keyboard and engaging with their new coworkers, which is exciting to them. Don't discount that. Your staff do not necessarily want to sit through a 30-minute video from your founders in the middle of their IT enrollment. Nobody wants to sit through a 30-minute from the founders kind of ever, just putting that out there. But as part of your process, don't hold them up if you don't have to. Now, I do recognize that installs like Xcode, for example, 8 gigs, oof, that's never going to be fun or easy. Office, 2 more. Creative Cloud, a couple hundred meg for the installer, and then a couple gigs for each of the applications. You're stuck. You've got to get them there. So maybe give them something to do, but I think that's a good place to start. All right, one last comment. I had to post my Wordle score. I know, one more idiot posting his Wordle score where everyone can see it. But there's a lesson here. Giving people a way to engage with your tools that's easy and fun ends up contagious. And giving them an experience that they enjoy, that they think that they were like, wow, that was really easy. I love that. They'll talk about that for a good long time. Good experience carries volumes. And providing a good experience that's simple and to the point is a great way to approach your deployment practices. So with that, we think about this environment. This is one of the more ideal workflows that JumpCloud can enable for you. You have a new coworker starting. You can send them an email invite to their personal address so that they can start the process of selecting their credential for the office. They do that initial password setup as well as any other documentation changes, make sure their name's spelled right, make sure all of those things exist, and you can stage that user days, weeks ahead of time so that those things happen when they're supposed to. Then they unbox their device, and that initial setup prepares the device for success. That's what's important in all of this. So again, I haven't flogged the JumpCloud pony too much. Come see us up at the booth this afternoon. And feel free to sign up for an account. console.jumpcloud.com/signup. You can sign up with a Google account, and it'll create everything you need. 10 users and 10 devices, free forever. And you can use those with the entirety of our product, not just our MDM, our IDP. We support Windows, Mac, and Linux for endpoints, with iOS and iPadOS, Light management now, Android management coming later this year. So please, come check us out, and join us at the booth for a 4 o'clock beverage this afternoon. And we have beer koozies for you to take home. So thank you, everybody. It's been a delight. And I think we're going to get to question time. So. All right. Interrogation begins. Who's first? Oh, in the back.
About updates and patching.
Yeah.
What would your recommendation be with people which are grabbing the window and just move it away?
It's coming back. That's the nice thing about the way our policy executes. Every 10 minutes, it's coming back. It'll come back to the center. They'll keep doing those things. But the other thing to recognize is that at some point, every one of those people who's moving the window away every 10 minutes, each one of those is them kind of sticking their finger at the policy that you have created as the IT admin to keep your organization safe. Failure to administer patches as the user is an HR policy violation at the end of the day. And in organizations, you may need help from your HR folks to back you up as IT in those cases. Those are policy violations. Now, that being said, the MDM hammer exists. You can use install now. Not a great experience for the end user because their system downloads the update and says, all right, I'm quitting everything right now. And that's a kill-9, by the way, so I hope you weren't working on anything important because it's gone now unless your application saves your bacon. BBEdit, for the record, still has the best document save experience, which is to say, don't have to. Cool. Other questions, concerns?
I think you're good.
All right.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, everyone. This was a delight.